In a galaxy ruled by empires of crystal and marble, where alien nobility see humans as little more than chained beasts, a forbidden spark ignites. Elena, heiress of the House of Jade, was raised in luxury and tradition, but no amount of wealth could cool the hunger burning inside her. Whispers of a captured human gladiator named Dario spread through the courts like wildfire, unbroken by torture, dangerous in silence, and hiding a secret that could topple thrones. When Elena dares to face him alone, chains are not the only things that break. What begins as curiosity turns into obsession, and obsession into rebellion. Desire becomes war, and in the clash of power and passion, both human and alien discover they are not master and slave, but something far more dangerous. Equals. The dungeons of the House of Jade were built to break spirits. Their stone walls were veined with living crystal that pulsed faintly, reacting to pain and fear like a predator scenting blood. Most prisoners lasted only a week before begging for death. But not the human. Elena stood before his cell, her silk robes whispering as she walked, her green-lit jewels casting reflections along the floor. Guards flanked her nervously, though their fear was not of her. It was of the man chained within. Dario sat against the wall, shirtless, his body marked with lashes and bruises. His wrists were cuffed in Zerian steel, heavy enough to drag most slaves to their knees. Yet he sat upright, defiant, his dark eyes fixed on Elena as if she were prey. Her pulse quickened. No one had ever looked at her like that. "Human," she said, her voice as smooth as the marble pillars above the palace. "Do you know who I am?" Dario's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. He did not bow. He did not even blink. The one who came to Gork. A flicker of anger burned in her chest. No one dared speak to her like this, not Nobby. Les, not generals, not servants. Yet she did not strike him. Instead, she stepped closer, ignoring the warning glance of her captain of guards. "You were taken from the pits of Terra's rebellion," Eleanor continued. "They say you killed 10 of my father's soldiers before they subdued you, with bare hands." His silence was heavier than chains. Elena leaned closer, studying him the way a collector studies a forbidden jewel. His body was scarred, but not broken. His silence was not submission. It was defiance sharpened into a weapon. "You should be begging," she whispered, almost to herself. "And yet—" Dario's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, Elena felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. She was not interrogating him. She was being measured, weighed. "I beg for nothing," he said at last, his voice low, rough as stone. Her throat tightened. Heat coiled through her body, equal parts fury and fascination. This was no ordinary slave. This was something dangerous, something forbidden. Elena dismissed the guards with a flick of her jeweled hand. They hesitated, protesting in nervous whispers, but she silenced them with a glare. The chamber door shut behind her. Now it was only the heiress and the human. She approached slowly, her slippers silent on the crystal floor. Dario followed her every movement, muscles tense, as if ready to spring despite his chains. "You fear nothing," Elena said softly, circling him. "Not even death." He tilted his head, his smile razor-thin. "Death fears me." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She should have laughed, should have dismissed them as bravado, yet something in his voice made her believe him. Her hand hovered above his chest, tracing but not touching the scars. The heat of his skin radiated into her palm. She wanted to feel the strength beneath, to test the edge of his defiance. But Dario moved first. In a flash, his bound hands shot up, grabbing her wrist with iron strength. Chains rattled as he pulled her closer, until their faces were inches apart. The guards would have killed him instantly if they'd been present, but they were not. Elena's heart thundered in her chest. She should have screamed. Instead, she whispered, "You dare." His grip did not loosen. His gaze burned into her with the intensity of a man who had lost everything but refused to surrender. "I am not your pet," he growled. "I am not your toy. Remember that." For a long moment, they stayed like that. Princess and prisoner, power shifting between them like a blade balanced on its edge. Then, slowly, Eleanor smiled. At last, Something in her sterile palace of crystal and obedience had come alive. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "We shall see, human. We shall see." When she finally pulled away, his grip loosened, not in defeat but in choice. Chains clinked as his hands fell back to his lap. Elena's pulse raced as she left the cell, her mind ablaze with a single truth she could not admit even to herself. For the first time in her life, the heiress of the House of Jade was not the one holding the leash. The memory of his grip lingered on her skin long after Elena left the dungeon. That night she sat before her mirror, her jeweled hairpins and golden silks discarded carelessly to the floor. Yet all she could see was not her reflection, but the image of him, bloodied, bruised, chained, and still looking at her like no one ever dared. Dario. The name was foreign on her tongue, but it echoed in her mind like a forbidden prayer. The court whispered about him constantly. Some wanted him executed as a warning to other humans. Others, the crueler ones, demanded his public mutilation in the arena for spectacle, but Elena could not forget the way he had caught her wrist, the unflinching fire in his eyes, the simple words, "I am not your toy." The next evening, against every warning, she returned. The guards bowed, though unease flickered in their movements. She dismissed them with a gesture more forceful than before. They obeyed, but their eyes betrayed dread of leaving their princess alone with the beast. When the dungeon doors clanged shut, silence filled the chamber. Dario sat chained as before, though now his gaze tracked her with quiet amusement. "You return," he said flatly. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, princess." Elena approached, carrying a crystal vial. Inside, glowing blue liquid shimmered faintly. She knelt, pouring a few drops on his wounds. The cuts closed slowly, the bruises faded. "I did not come to watch you rot," she murmured. He studied her with suspicion, as if every kindness must mask a blade. "Then why are you here?" The truth slipped out before she could stop it. "Because you do not bow." For the first time, Dario laughed. Low, bitter, but real. "And that fascinates you? That your pet doesn't lick the hand that feeds?" Elena should have struck him. Instead, she reached for the key at her belt. The heavy cuffs clinked as she unlocked them, one by one. The chains fell to the ground. Dario did not leap at her. He did not flee. He simply rubbed his wrists, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "You've just committed treason against your own blood," he said. "Why?" Her throat tightened. The answer was both simple and impossible, because she wanted to see him unbound, because she wanted to test whether the fire in him burned brighter without chains, because she wanted to know what it felt like to stand before a man who saw her not as heir, not as princess, but as woman. Instead, she whispered, "Because I choose to." He rose to his full height, towering over her. Without chains, his presence filled the cell. Elena's breath caught. Fear mingled with something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Desire. Dario stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. His hand brushed against the column behind her head, caging her without touching. "And what is it you choose, Elena of Jade?" Her name on his lips sent heat spiraling through her. None of her suitors, none of the lords who bowed and grovelled had ever spoken her name with such raw defiance, with no title, no reverence, only truth. Her hand trembled as it rose, brushing against his chest. He was warm, alive, scarred, a living defiance carved in flesh. "I choose," she whispered, "to see what cannot be seen, to touch what I am forbidden." His gaze hardened. "And if what you seek destroys you, then let it." The air between them burned. He leaned closer, lips inches from hers, but stopped. His restraint was a blade sharper than any kiss. "You play with fire, princess," he growled softly, "and fire consumes." Her lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Then burn me." For the first time, Dario faltered, not in strength, but in resolve. Her hunger mirrored his own, and in that reflection, chains shattered more completely than iron ever could. The arena of the House of Jade was carved from living crystal, its walls shimmering like frozen fire under the twin suns. For centuries, it had been the stage where nobles paraded their power, watching gladiators bleed for their amusement. Today, it was different. The galleries were filled to bursting. Nobles in silk robes and jeweled masks whispered rumors fanned by scandal. They had heard of the princess who slipped into the dungeons too often, of the human slave who refused to break. And now they had gathered to witness his end. Dario stood in the sand, bare-chested, scars glear, Ming in the heat. His wrists were free, by Elena's decree, but his ankles were bound with a length of ceremonial chain, a mockery of freedom. A dozen alien champions surrounded him, each chosen from the Empire's fiercest bloodlines. Clad in ornate armor, wielding plasma-forged blades, they were meant to overwhelm him quickly and spectacularly. The crowd roared for blood. Above them all, Eleanor sat in the royal box beside her father, Lord Cale of Jade. Her hands were folded in her lap, her expression serene, but her heart thundered like war drums. Her father leaned toward her, his voice heavy with scorn. "Your fascination ends today. Watch closely, child. Watch what becomes of pets who defy their masters." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Her eyes never left Dario. The signal horn blared. The champions charged. Dario did not move until the first blade swung for his head. Then he erupted into motion, faster than the eye could follow. He ducked beneath the strike, seized the attacker's wrist, and twisted until bone snapped. The alien screamed as Dario wrenched the blade free and drove it clean through his chest. The crowd gasped. The second came at him from behind. Dario spun, using the dead champion's body as a shield, plasma blades searing flesh. He hurled the corpse into the third, then vaulted over both, his chain whipping like a weapon as he crushed another's skull against the crystal floor. Blood sprayed across the sand. The nobles shouted in fury, some in awe. Lord Cale gripped the railing, his mask slipping for the first time into disbelief. In the silence of the dungeon, heiress and captive stood face to face, no longer master and slave, but something far more dangerous. Equal. But Elena leaned forward, her lips parting, her breath quickening. Every strike, every roar, every defiant glare from Dario was a firestorm in her chest. He was not performing for the crowd. He was not fighting for his life. He was fighting for freedom. And she realized with a rush of heat and terror that she wanted him to win. By the seventh kill, the sand was slick with crimson. Dario moved like a beast unleashed, wielding two blades now, his body a blur of violence and fury. He fought not as a gladiator trained for spectacle, but as a survivor who had clawed his way through wars no alien court could imagine. One by one, the champions fell. At last, silence swept the arena. Only Dario stood, his chest heaving, his skin streaked with blood that was not his own. He raised a blade and pointed it, not at the crowd, not at the guards, but at the royal box. At Elena. The gesture was not threat, but declaration. He had survived, he had conquered, and in that moment, with the galaxy watching, he bound her fate to his. Whispers tore through the galleries like wildfire. The princess has chosen him. The human is her champion, her equal. Lord Cale's face darkened with fury, but Elena rose to her feet before he could speak. Her voice rang across the arena, clear and unyielding. "Dario of Earth," she cried, "you are no longer a slave, you are mine, and before all gathered here, I claim you, not as property, but as equal." The arena exploded in chaos. Some shouted in rage, others in disbelief. But beneath the uproar, a new chant began to rise, hesitant at first, then louder, fiercer, unstoppable. "Dario! Dario! Dario!" The nobles had come to witness a slave's death. Instead, they had seen the birth of rebellion. And in the royal box, Elena's father turned to her, his voice trembling with fury. "You have doomed us all." But Elena only smiled, her eyes never, leaving the blood-soaked man in the arena. The Palace of Jade had always been a place of ritual. Jeweled feasts, endless ceremonies, whispered politics in corridors of living crystal. But after the arena, those halls echoed with something new. Fear. Elena felt it in every glance as she passed. Nobles who once bowed with rehearsed reverence now avoided her eyes. Servants whispered in corners. Courtiers recoiled at the rumour-made flesh. The heiress had chosen a human, not as pet or trophy, but as equal. Her father raged. "Do you understand what you've done?" Lord Cale thundered in the throne chamber, his voice reverberating through marble pillars. "The blood of our house is sacred. You spit on it, on me, before the entire empire." Elena stood tall, unflinching. I gave the court truth. They saw strength, they saw fire, they saw what you fear most, that the chains you built can be broken. Her father's eyes narrowed. You mistake spectacle for power. He is a man, one man, nothing more. But Dario, standing silent beside her, was no longer one man. He was symbol, flame, contagion. Already, whispers spread among the gladiator pits, among the servants and the slaves who had always known chains. The human killed the champions. The princess defied her father. Together they defied the empire. It was rebellion, and rebellion is a disease that spreads. That night, Elena and Dario met in the private chambers she once used to study poetry and politics. Now it felt like the heart of conspiracy. She poured wine, her hands trembling, not from fear of him, but from the storm she herself had unleashed. They will come for us, she said quietly, pacing. The council will not forgive. My father will not forgive. Every noble will sharpen their knives. No, she whispered, I have freed us. Dario drank from the goblet as though the threat meant nothing. His dark eyes tracked her as a predator watches the horizon. Then let them come. She stopped, facing him. You don't understand. This is not the arena. This is a dynasty that has ruled for centuries. They will bring armies, fleets, priests to damn me, assassins to kill you. He set the goblet down with a heavy thud. Good. The word shocked her more than any threat. Good? Dario stepped closer, closing the space between them. He was taller, broader, scarred, but it wasn't his body that made her tremble. It was the conviction in his voice. They think power is inherited, he said. They think crowns and bloodlines make them strong, but I have seen strength in the pits of earth, in the fires of rebellion, in the eyes of men and women who would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. That is power. That is us. His words burned through her, shattering the last of her hesitation. She reached for him, not as heiress, not as princess, but as woman. Their lips met with the ferocity of battle. The taste of blood, wine, and rebellion mingled between them. It was not love born of softness. It was fire forged in defiance. Every kiss was a promise. Every touch was a declaration. They would not bow. They would not yield. By dawn, word had already spread beyond the palace. Guards sworn to Kyle vanished in the night, siding with whispers of the human king. Slaves began to riot in the streets, chanting Dario's name. Banners of jade were torn down, torches lit in defiance. Elena stood at the balcony with Dario at her side, looking down at the chaos, flames reflected in her emerald eyes. My father will unleash the army, she said. Let him, Dario replied. For every blade he raises, we will raise 10 more. For every chain he rattles, we will break it. And when she turned to him, she saw not he, a captive, not her defiance, but her partner, a man who had been born in chains, but walked like a king. Their rebellion had begun, not with armies, but with flesh, with fire, with a kiss that dared the galaxy to stop them. And the galaxy would burn for it. The House of Jade had stood for 1,000 years. Its banners of emerald silk hung from towers of crystal, its throne carved from a single slab of luminous stone. Generations of nobles had walked its halls, certain of their eternity. But eternity was bleeding. Riots shook the streets below. Slaves tore off collars, servants smashed statues of lords long dead, and the chants of Dario, Dario thundered through the city. Barracks burned, armories cracked open, and for the first time in centuries the people of Jade raised weapons not for their masters, but against them. Lord Kale raged within the throne chamber, his voice echoing over the chaos. Call the legions, summon the fleets, drown the city in fire if we must. But the captains faltered, the legionnaires hesitated. Too many had seen the arena, too many had felt the shift. Loyalty to bloodlines cracked under the weight of fear and awe. And at the head of the storm stood Elena and Dario. They marched not with soldiers in gleaming armor, but with freed men and women, gladiators armed with stolen blades, servants clutching farming tools turned into weapons. Their army was raw, furious, desperate, but they were united, and unity was a force no empire could contain. The palace gates trembled under the assault. Cracks spread through crystal doors as the mob surged forward. Inside, nobles shrieked and fled, their silks catching fire as revolution spilled into the sacred halls. Elena strode through the chaos like a goddess of fire, her hair unbound, her robes torn, her eyes burning with fury and ecstasy. At her side, Dario moved like the storm itself, cutting dew, own soldiers with a blade in one hand, a chain in the other, his presence both warrior and king. At last, they entered the throne chamber. Lord Kael stood upon the dais, his emerald crown glinting under shattered light. Behind him, guards raised spears, trembling but unwilling to desert their lord in his final hour. Elena's voice rang out, sharp as a blade. "Father, it ends tonight." His eyes, once proud, now burned with betrayal. "Daughter, you would destroy everything for lust? For a slave?" Dario stepped forward, his bloodied blade gleaming. "Not a slave. A man, and a man who will see your empire fall." Kael's face twisted in rage. "You think strength lies in chaos? In mongrels and rebels? You are nothing, both of you, nothing but sparks to be stamped out." He raised his scepter, its crystal core pulsing with power. Energy crackled, ready to unleash death. But Elena moved first. Her hand struck the scepter aside, the energy discharging into the throne itself. The luminous stone exploded, shards raining down like glass. Gasps tore through the chamber. "Enough!" she spat, her voice carrying like thunder. "Your throne is ash. Your reign is over." Dario leapt forward, his blade meeting Kael's guard. The clash rang like a bell announcing the end of an era. They fought amid the ruins of the throne, father against daughters chosen, empire against rebellion. Kael was skilled, but rage made him sloppy. Dario fought with the calm of a man who had already known death and had nothing left to fear. In moments, the emerald crown tumbled across the floor, rolling into the firelight. Kael fell to his knees, blade at his throat. His eyes darted to Eleanor, desperate. "Daughter, you are Jade. You are the bloodline. End this madness before it consumes us all." For the first time, Eleanor did not waver. She stepped forward, standing beside Dario, her hand resting on his arm as though sealing a vow. "No," she said coldly. "I am fire, and fire consumes." Dario's blade flashed. The chamber fell silent. The noble, the guards, the servants, everyone in the hall dropped to their knees, not in loyalty, not in worship, but in submission to a power they could no longer deny. Elena bent, lifted the fallen crown, and turned to Dario. With deliberate grace, she placed it upon his head. "Rise," she declared, "not as slave, not as champion, but as king." The House of Jade, once unbreakable, collapsed in a single night, not by conquest of fleets, but by rebellion born of forbidden fire. And as flames consumed the banners and crystal towers, a new dynasty was born. The fires of rebellion smouldered for days, painting the skies of jade red and gold. Crystal towers that had stood for centuries now lay shattered, their shards scattered like bones across the capital. Where once nobles paraded in silk and jewels, barefoot children now roamed, clutching scraps of bread stolen from shattered banquet halls. But in the chaos, something new was being born. At the heart of the ruined throne chamber, Elena and Dario stood not as princess and captive, but as rulers of a kingdom no one had dared imagine. The emerald crown sat upon Dario's head, though he wore it uneasily, as if mocking the very idea of rule. Elena, standing beside him, wore no crown at all. Her fire was authority enough. Together they looked out at the sea of kneeling rebels, soldiers, servants, and former slaves. Elena raised her voice, clear and unyielding. "The House of Jade is ash. Its legacy of chains and cruelty is ended. From this day, none shall be slave, none shall kneel in fear." The crowd roared, the sound raw and wild, not rehearsed like the empty chants of old, but alive. Dario's voice followed, deep and steady. "I was born in chains, I fought in blood, but today we forge a new kingdom, not of marble, not of thrones, a kingdom of flesh and fire, built by those who dare to rise." The cry that followed shook the city. For the first time, the people felt not obedience, but belonging. The days that followed were not peace, but transformation. Nobles fled into the stars, carrying tales of horror and scandal, the heiress bedding a human slave, the throne claimed by blood and rebellion. Some swore they would return with fleets to reclaim what was theirs. Others vanished into obscurity, unwilling to face the fire that had consumed Jade. But within the city, life shifted. The gladiator pits were torn down, their cages dismantled. Servants, once bound by collars, were offered choice: stay and build, or leave and seek new destinies. Many stayed, drawn not by chains, but by the intoxicating vision of something untried. freedom. At night, Elena and Dario ruled not from separate chambers, but together, their passion burning as fiercely as their rebellion. Their union was no delicate romance, it was tempest and storm, flesh and hunger. Each embrace was both battle and vow. In the quiet after their fury, Elena would trace the scars on his body, whispering promises of a future carved by their own hands, not dictated by bloodlines. "You should wear the crown," Dario told her once, holding her in the darkness. "You are the fire, I am only the sword." She pressed her lips to his, fierce and claiming. "No, you are the fire with me. Together we are both crown and sword." Beyond Jade, the galaxy trembled. Other houses watched in terror as whispers spread. The human rules, the princess defied blood, the empire is not eternal. For the first time in living memory, slaves on distant worlds dared to lift their eyes, dared to imagine revolt. Some called it blasphemy, others called it salvation. Within months, emissaries arrived, some to kneel, others to conspire. Elena and Dario received them all with the same calm fury. They demanded no oaths of servitude, no titles of fealty. What they demanded was respect. "Stand," Dario told a trembling envoy from the House of Onyx, who tried to kneel. "If you wish to serve, do so on your feet. We have no need for crawling dogs." But even as power grew, the shadows lengthened. Elena knew the old houses would not sit idle forever. Fleets would come, wars would follow. Yet fear no longer held her heart. She had Dario, and Dario had her. Together, they were not merely rulers, they were fire given flesh, and fire spreads. On the anniversary of the rebellion, they stood upon the balcony of the ruined palace, their people gathered in the square below. The banners of Jade were gone. In their place burned new standards, black and red, marked by the sigil of a flame devouring a chain. Elena raised her hand, Dario's fingers entwined with hers. "This is not the end," she declared, her voice rolling like thunder. "This is the beginning, a kingdom forged not by bloodlines, but by will. Not by thrones, but by fire. Our fire, your fire." The people roared, their voices rising like a storm, echoing through the stars. And as Dario looked at Elena, fierce and radiant beside him, he realized the truth that every noble, every slave, every world would soon know. The galaxy did not belong to crowns of crystal. It belonged to those willing to burn the old order to ash and build something new from the flames. A kingdom of flesh and fire,